Namaste, Swagatam. We are very delighted to continue with this series on the Bhagavad Gita, a summary of each chapter totaling 18, so that we may comprehend how our ancient texts are replete with traditional wisdom that is very relevant to current times, an essential learning to solve our problems of both the here and hereafter. We have with us Aarti Nagarajanji, a student of Pujaswami Dayananda Saraswati, who has studied the Bhagavad Gita in detail at the Arti Vidya Gurukulam in Anikatti, as a full-time student of Vedanta and Sanskritam from 2014 to 2017 under the guidance of Acharya Swami Sadatmananda Saraswati ji. She has worked in the IT industry for 12 years prior to joining the course, and she has taught the entire Bhagavad Gita once and is presently teaching it again for the second time. Vanakkam Aarti ji. Thank you so much for agreeing to guide us with the summaries of the Bhagavad Gita chapters. As usual, I'll start with a few questions. Aarti ji, could you please introduce this chapter? Now we are in 14, chapter 14. What is it about? What are its core teachings? And what is the purpose of this knowledge?
Holy shit, one after. We saw in the 13th chapter, Kshetrajna Vibhaga was the topic where we saw who is Kshetrajna. Consciousness principle. One said, I am Kshetrajna in all the Kshetras. Kshetra referred to the body, mind, senses, and everything, which is the world, whatever is experienced, that was called Kshetra. Seeing in the previous chapters how the entire creation is but of Purusha and Prakriti. Now, it was also said that the gunas of the Prakriti are the cause for samsara bondage. Therefore, this chapter is started by Bhagavan to explain Prakriti. What are these gunas? How do they bind? How does one get released from it? And what are the characteristics of a person who is free from it? What is the purpose of this knowledge? Bhagavan gives an introduction to this chapter with the purpose. He says, knowing this, one will gain moksha.
So, what are the gunas then? So, can you describe the gunas and how they play about in our mind and behavior? You know the names, I think, but yeah, we would like to know
Yes.
more detail.
Yes, of course. Yeah, everybody must be familiar with the three gunas: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Maya, whom we call by other names, Prakriti, Yoni, these words are used. Maya consists of these three gunas, qualities which are Sattvam, Rajas, and Tamas. What is the nature of Sattva? It is of the nature of purity, illumination, and free from affliction. How does it play about in our mind and behavior? In the form of wisdom, in the form of tranquility, in the form of contentment, the form of clarity, goodness. These are the expressions of Sattva in the mind. And we have to understand our body, our mind, our senses, and the whole world is but a product of these three gunas.
Yeah.
Whatever we see, whatever we perceive, experience is but a variation, a combination, a product of these gunas. So every mind is made of these three gunas. So they express in different ways. So Sattva expresses in this way. What is Rajas? What is its nature? It is of the nature of color. Bhagavan says Ragatmakam. Raga means it is of the nature of coloring, just as how you wear goggles which are painted with a particular color, the whole world looks like that. In the same way, this raga colors the mind of the person. In what form does it express? In the form of activity. propels the person towards activity. It expresses in the form of desire, in the form of restlessness. All these are just all the other powerful emotions like anger, all those hatred, or even longing, craving. All these are expressions of rajas. Anxiety, stress, all this. And next, tamas. Tamas is of the nature of inertia, the basic principle of inertia. That is tamas. It is of the nature of darkness, it is of the nature of ignorance. How does it express? It expresses in the form of confusion, it deludes the beings, and it also expresses in the form of laziness. One says pramada means carelessness, indolence, and sleep. These are the expressions of tamas.
Excessive sleep, I hope, because we do need sleep, right?
No, sleep itself is because of tamas.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, but if we all have the same gunas and we're a combination of that RTG, we should all be similar and in our behavior and mind, how what we think, right? But that is not so.
Yes, because even though we are a combination of the same three gunas, one can dominate over the other. So when sattva is predominant, rajas and tamas are pushed back. When rajas is predominant, sattva and tamas are pushed back, and likewise when tamas is predominant, sattva and rajas are pushed back. Now, from childhood, every being is a combination of these three. We can see even in the lifespan of a person, it varies. We see a baby is tamas predominant because it's always sleeping. It only wakes up for milk and then sleeps, goes back to sleep. Then slowly, when it grows up, then rajas is predominant. It starts moving about, full of curiosity. So grows up when rajas is predominant, and then by acquiring knowledge, by acquiring values, good discipline, then tamas can get predominant. Of course, even in a day, a person can go through all these predominant. So when one wakes up, then rajas, because of some rajas, one gets up, then goes about working, starts working. What do you do once you wake up? You go through the list of things to be done today. Then you start checking off, right? All these. So that is all because of rajas being predominant. One is set to action. But there are moments in the day where you are focused, you are clear, you are content, there is knowledge. All those are sattva predominant. Then at the end of the day, or these two get subdued and tamas becomes predominant, one goes to sleep. So that is how there is dominance of one over the other. How do you know there is dominance of sattva? Then that person becomes sattva pradhana person. Pradhana means which is most prominent. So sattva pradhana person, how do you infer? What are the various ways which you know? Yeah. So when knowledge happens, when there is knowledge, when there is goodness, when the person has sukha. Sukha means there is some happiness. Happiness happens only when there is a sattvic mind. The mind has to be predominantly sattva. Only then this sukha, happiness can manifest.
Yeah.
And you will have, the person will have this clarity, wisdom, all this. It is seen when sattva is dominant. When rajas is dominant, then one sees greed, there is desire, longing, which brings about undertaking activities. It pushes one to activities, and there is restlessness, both mental as well as physical. You can see some people, they can't sit still. they have to keep shaking a leg or doing some antics or the other. They may be if they pass through some plants, they will start plucking the leaves. All these are predominance of rajas. Restlessness, mental in the form of agitation, in the form of disturbances, all that, as well as physical restlessness. When tamas is predominant, then it expresses in the form of, as we saw, sleepiness, slothfulness, forgetfulness. One does not do what is to be done. There is negligence of duty, carelessness, and more ignorance. There is a lot of ignorance. So when tamas is predominant, these are seen in the person.
So are these the way that you describe that these gunas bind us? That if we are careless, then it is binding us. But how? So I'm a bit confused because how will knowledge bind us? So how do these gunas bind us?
Yes. So Bhagavan is talking about how each guna binds the person. Even though they are gunas by themselves, they are, they are okay. They are, if they are seen objectively, then they are what they are. When there is predominance of a particular guna, then it can bind the person. How does sattva bind the person? It binds by giving sukha, and it makes the person attached to the sukha that sattva gives. The happiness that one gains from knowledge, from clarity, from harmony, from a life of tranquility, that person gets addicted to it. And if there is any disturbance in that, then immediately one is disturbed. I heard that there was one sannyasi who felt in his surrounding things are not okay, it's always crowded, noisy. So left the town and went to the Himalayas, went to Rishikesh. And there he stayed near the Ganga. There also he said, it is too crowded, I want to go to another quiet place. Rishikesh in the 60s, it was
Yes.
really very, quiet there. But even that, even the Ganga is making so much noise. If you go near, you can see hear the roar of Ganga. So what the person, even Gangaji is a disturbance. Then the person said, I want to go somewhere else where it is quiet. Then he got another place.
Yeah.
Further up Rishikesh on the way to Gangotri. There he got a nice place which had the accommodation, food, and everything. Then he was asked, "Are you okay?" Then he said, "Yeah."
Food.
Yeah, it was found that he had shifted even from that place. When asked what happened, he said, "The birds are making too much noise." When you are in a wooded area, then
There will be good.
where the birds start roosting, right? Even that becomes so much of a disturbance for the person. When the person becomes addicted to this quietude, peace, harmony. How does Rajas bind? Further, in Sattva also, we can see the person, if the person is Sattva, then the person is oriented towards Dharma, sticks to Dharma. So even a little bit of Adharma can disturb the person. So the person's own values and morality causes disturbance when it is not followed by other people. So in that way, Sattva binds a person. By giving Sukha, it binds. Then we have Rajas. What happens when Rajas dominates? Then the person is propelled towards activity one after the other. So you do this, next. The next job is waiting for you. You do that. You are always planning to do more and more. And it gets to a level where then it becomes a greed. I want more, more, more. So we see people who become workaholics. They do not know why they are working. Even after earning whatever is required for a comfortable life, the person goes on and on, saving for generations together. We don't know what they will do or whether this will last. but still the person is propelled by desire, greed, and keeps working. So that's how this
Rajas.
Rajas binds the person through karma. Sattva binds the person through sukha. Rajas binds the person through karma, action. And this karma, when one does, then definitely there is karma phala, the result of action in the form of punya papa. Then again there is janma. Then there again samsara. So this continues. So this is the bondage because of rajas being predominant. Then what about tamas?
Yeah.
If tamas is predominant in one's life, then one is always sleepy, does not do what is to be done. Say there is a task, you know you have to do, you have to clean your room, but still scrolling through the phone, watching reels for hours together. What is that tamas? So you are not doing what is to be done. There is negligence, there is carelessness, there is indifference towards things. What will happen? Even if I do, it's going to be the same thing. So they will find excuses not to do what is to be done. And there is incapacity to think properly. So you cannot differentiate between what is dharma, adharma, what is right, what is wrong. Therefore, the person can take to things which are not to be done. Even in Rajas it is possible, even in Tamas it is possible. That's why Rakshasas, we see in the Puranas, they were Rajas and Tamas dominant. That is why their nature was such. So this person can be oriented towards inactivity, not doing what is to be done, carelessness, negligence, and all that, and ignorance, steeped in ignorance. So that is how tamas bites the person.
So, if a person is dominated by certain guna, so what is the result of such a lifestyle or a life that one is living a tamas predominated life or a rajas or a sattva guna predominated life? So, how does that? What does that look? Such a life. What is the result of such a life?
Bhagavan talks about both the short-term result and the long-term result. Short-term result, if sattva is predominant, it is seen in the form of good actions, the pleasure that one gets through harmony. That is the and knowledge. Knowledge is the result of sattvika actions. So that is the short-term result. And Bhagavan also talks about what happens when a person dies, being sattva predominates. Then the person goes to higher lokas where it is possible to have purity and happiness and peace. So the higher lokas. What happens when sattva is predominant? The result, short-term result is action, of course. And Bhagavan says pain. It results in pain. The phalam for rajas is pain. How pain can be the result? We can, if one is constantly engaged in action, planning, scheming, always working towards a particular goal, propelled by desire, greed, and definitely there is stress, there is anxiety, and there is some pain caused. One's own, we say no pain, no gain, right? So for some gain, definitely there is some pain. And if the person is taking to adharma, wrongful actions in order to achieve results, then definitely it is going to cause papa. And karma is of the kind, if it is not regulated, if it is let to run rut, then definitely one can have the tendency to do it by hook or crook. Therefore, definitely, dharma is breached. When dharma is breached, there is papa. Papa will result in the form of painful situations. So there is pain. Dukkham is said as the result of rajas. Then what happens when the person dies, when rajas is predominant? The person is born in the births where again one is propelled towards action, like Manushya Loka, where karma action is predominant. Then what about tamas? Taka's short-term goal is ignorance, not both, but result is ignorance. When the person is steeped in tamas, then it results in ignorance. What happens when the person dies when tamas is predominant? Then the person takes birth in the form of animals, plants, which are termed as lower janmas, lower births.
So, in the spiritual path, we are advised that we should be sattva predominant, obviously, because the other gunas are, like you said, it's a lower level of living. There is pain, ignorance. So, when we are sattva predominant, that Gita and Bhagwan tell us that is also binding. At the same time, it's a tool for liberation. So, is it not a bit contradictory in that sense? We are advised to be sattva predominant, but that can also be binding. At the same time, it is a tool for liberation. So, can you please unfold that for us, Arpit?
Yes, in Vedanta, for one to understand what is being said, to gain this knowledge, it is, of course, advised or it is shown that one should be moving towards sattva predominant life. Because being in rajas and tamas, one cannot have a peaceful mind. Only a tranquil mind can gain this knowledge, can understand, can grasp, and stay with it. So definitely one has to work towards being more sattva. How does that one do it? How does one do it? By living a life of discipline, of inculcating values, and living a life of moderation. We saw in the fourth chapter, Bhagavan talked about moderation in food, also what kind of food one eats, how much one engages in activity, what is the surrounding of the person, through satsanga, through association with wise people, through the study of the Shastra, one can become more and more sattva. But being sattva also is like a golden shackle, even though that is needed. But we cannot say that is the ultimate goal because we saw how even sattva binds the person. When the person is used to only having a quiet atmosphere, a quiet mind, even a small disturbance disturbs the person. So even a mental disturbance, oh, my mind is so disturbed today, it is so restless. It should not be like that. I'm sattvic. I want to be sattvic. So getting used to a sattvic mind can cause a fragile state of mind for the person. So sattva can also become a golden shackle. So one should move from being sattva predominant to transcending even that.
Okay, so transcending is the important point here.
Yes.
So get to the point of from maybe tamas to rajas, rajas to sattva, and then transcending is the essential aspect where this will get us to a place where we can get the knowledge and then we have to transcend. Regarding rajas, RTJ, in today's world, ambition, hustle, all these are considered as virtues because if you're in a corporate or any job, if you want to be highly performing individual, we are supposed to have that because as you said rajas predominant rajas will bring us to action at the same time it causes pain. So how can we be a highly performing individual in our lives where we are working in a profession without being bound by that rajasic greed? So what is that how can we achieve that?
Yes, definitely being high performing means that rajas is predominant. But how do we keep it clean? How do we keep it unaffected by greed? Then definitely one has to become a little more sattva. There is an order which is talked about. Based on this order of the gunas, one is categorized into a particular, varna, where we saw in the fourth chapter also it was talked about. If sattva is predominant, backed by rajas and tamas, then the person is inclined only towards knowledge, more towards knowledge, wisdom, clarity, and all that. That person is called Guna Brahman, not by birth, Guna Brahman. Then, if Rajas is predominant, backed by Sattva and then Tamas, then the person is a Kshatriya Guna person, Guna Kshatriya, where the person is involved in activity, but then they are aligned with Dharma. Then, not only that, the person acts for the sake of other people,
Yeah.
for the good of other people, a Kshatriya, a Guna Kshatriya. Then the next category is where Rajas is predominant, but backed by Tamas, then Sattva. When Rajas is backed by Tamas, then the activity is bound only to cause good for oneself. Selfish activities based on greed, based on one's own growth. So that is a Guna Vaishya, where Rajas is backed by Tamas rather than Sattva. Now the fourth category is Tamas is predominant, backed by Rajas, then Sattva. That person is called Guna Shudra. So that person will be, always in this stupor, and only when required, the person will engage in activity. But that doesn't mean there is no sattva. That person also gains knowledge, gains happiness. So, but we see that tamas is predominant. Now, in this work life, how do you be a highly performing individual but keeping it clean? One, instead of being a guna vaishya, where the activity is because of one's motivated by one's greed, one does it for the good, for the common good. So how does one practice that? We saw in the previous chapter a karma yogi. For a karma yogi, Bhagavan gave a series of steps. If you are not able to keep your mind always connected to me, then you do abhyasa, he said, you practice. If that is not possible, then he said, you do your karma for my sake. That is where this comes in. So, what is the motivation for action? That is very important. Is it because of greed, or is it because I have to do this? Even in the Shastras, prosperity is encouraged. It says, Kushalanna pramaditavyam. In Taittiriya Upanishad, it is said, one should work for a prosperous life. That is fine. But it should not lead one to go overboard and start accumulating more than what is required. That is where greed comes in. So, one can work very effectively when one does work as worship, as a karma yogi. This is to be done, I am doing for Bhagavan's sake. Only when one is attached to the result of the action, then stress comes in, anxiety comes in. Then, in order to control the result, the person can get into adharmic ways. All that can happen. Bends the rules. But when one sticks to doing what is to be done and aligning that with dharma, then one can still be high performing and not be affected by the pain that runs with us.
Okay. And these gunas are constantly playing in everybody's mind, and we are under that influence. So, how do we get out of that influence of gunas? Because, as you had said, even sattva can bind. So, even the ultimate guna, or at least where we are supposed to be, that is our goal from tamas, rajas to sattva predominant life or lifestyle. So, the gunas anyway bind, and sattva itself, sattva predominance also binds. So, how do we get out of that influence? Because you said we have to transcend it. And then you said,
Yes. So here, Bhagavan talks about how each guna binds, and finally, how should one get released from those gunas? That is also about. How does one get released from the influence of the gunas?
Okay.
Every individual is a combination of Purusha and Prakriti. Every being is because is formed, Bhagavan said in the 13th chapter, is because of the association of Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti means all these three gunas. Mayas, three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. The body, mind, senses are of these gunas, are formed by these gunas. So there is always a play of these gunas. The body can be tamas, sattva, predominant. Of course, it's a combination of the elements which are a product again of these three gunas alone. So definitely there will be an influence of the gunas in the mind, in the body, in the senses. But if one is able to transcend these gunas, one can get released from the gunas. Bhagavan says this. You cannot win over these gunas because winning will involve being sattva predominant.
Yeah.
The ultimate goal. If you are within the gunas, the highest that one can gain is being sattva predominant. But that also, as we saw, is a shackle, golden shackle. Therefore, that is not the goal. But transcending the gunas, that is the only way of getting released from the gunas.
and how do we transcend that? And also, how do gunas bind something where you had told us that self is unaffected by anything and it's free? So how do we transcend it, the gunas, and why should the gunas affect something which is essentially free, which is the Atma?
Yes. Every individual I saw is because of the association of Prakriti, which is that pure consciousness in association with the three gunas in the form of body, mind, sense.
Wait. Some.
And the body, mind, sense complex, being a product of the gunas, are always under the influence of the gunas. So, how does one transcend them? By knowing that I am already free. Why is there a binding? How do the gunas bind? The gunas by themselves are of that nature. But why do they become a binding factor for the person? Is because of the strong identification with the guna.
Actually.
So if we're identifying, so it's all mental. Only if we identify with the gunas will bind us. So if we don't let them mentally, if we are not identifying with the gunas, then we are not bound by it. Is that as simple as that?
Yes, it is cognitive. Only through knowledge one can transcend the gunas. One cannot physically do, get over the gunas, because physical again is a product of rajas or any activity. So, transcending gunas is only in the form of knowledge that I am Purusha who is ever free, who is ever unaffected by the three gunas. Even though the gunas are in play, and I am the one who gives the being for those very gunas to come into play. Without me, the gunas cannot exist. Just in my presence, all these gunas play out. And we saw in the previous chapter, Bhagavan gave 2 examples, just as how space is accommodating everything and yet unaffected by the things which it accommodates. And just as how the sun illuminates everything without being affected by anything that it illuminates. There is no action involved in illumination. Just in its presence, everything gets illuminated. In the same way, I consciousness existence gave the very being for the Prakriti, the gunas to come into being as well as function. And yet, I am unaffected by the gunas. Only through this knowledge, Bhagavan says, the one who knows that the actor, the one who acts, he are the gunas. So in the third chapter also, Bhagavan said, the one who acts is only the three gunas. The gunas engage with other gunas. I am unaffected by that. Only when this knowledge happens, then one can transcend the guna. Now, how does guna bind the Atma which is already free? It doesn't bind. It is only because of ignorance we think that it binds, because of the identification. The identification alone makes a person think that I am bound. When I identify with the mind, then all that plays out in the mind through the variations of the three gunas, I think I am those. I am angry, I am restless,
No one.
I am now peaceful when there is sattva, or I am sleepy, I am dull. So, what is happening there? It is only the gunas which are functioning, but I identify with those gunas and then feel bound. Bondage itself is a notion.
Good.
It has said this small story I read somewhere. So this person, typical, Western rich person, loses everything, high-paying job and all the luxurious items in his life, then gets deluded, comes to Himalayas, the Indian dream. Just like there is an American dream, there is an Indian dream. Then one wants to go to the Himalayas, so this person went to the Himalayas and found a sadhu in a cave, was so peaceful, was so happy. Then this went to Raj. I have lost everything in life. I don't know what to do. I feel like giving up my life. Then that sadhu asked, are you aware of your pain? Yes. It kills me every moment that I lost all those things. I had those things and yet I lost them. It pains me so much. If you are aware of the pain, then how can you be that pain?
I do so.
When this question was asked, then the person said, yes, that is true. I am aware of the pain. That means I am not that pain. Wow, he said, you have freed me. I am so happy. Then that sadhu knocked on the person's head and said, hey, this is also something you are aware of. Your joy. So this is also a play of the gunas. Even happiness or sorrow, both are a play of gunas. But then I say, I am happy. I am sorrowful. So when I identify with the gunas, then there is bondage. When I know that I am not the gunas, I am unaffected by the gunas.
Okay.
So, what is the state of the person who is free from all these three gunas, Artiji? And how does one attain it? Although you said it's cognitive once we stop identifying, but still. So, how do we attain this state, and what is the characteristic of a blessed state?
Yes, Bhagavan talks about at the end of the chapter regarding a person. How the person's wisdom of being a gunatita. Gunatita means the one who has transcended the gunas, the one who has gone beyond the gunas. How the person expresses himself, how his life is. So there, the main quality which is talked about is the person is undisturbed
Good.
by the play of the three gunas. So even when there is prakasha, when there is knowledge happening, when there is clarity, peace, then also the person is neutral. When there is this rajas action happening, restlessness, then also the person sees that as the play of the gunas, is unaffected. When there is dullness, then also the person doesn't think I am dull. but sees that as the manifestation of tamas. Whenever these gunas are playing out in the form of their various expressions, the person is unaffected by the gunas. And that is how the person is able to have that equanimity of the mind with respect to all the opposites in the world. So the various opposites are talked about. Even in sukha or dukkha, in pain or pleasure, the person is same. So sameness with regarding to pain or pleasure. We saw pleasure is sattva and pain is rajas. So the person knowing that I am not the gunas, I am just the witness of the gunas is unaffected. Likewise, when there is praise or censure, the person is unaffected. When there is honor or dishonor, even then one is unaffected. Because they are all a play of gunas alone. And because of the strength of being with this knowledge, the person is able to handle any situation, all the opposites. And it is also said the person does not engage in any activity for personal reasons, personal goals. There is no axe to grind for the person, nothing more to be done, having gained this knowledge. Therefore, the person does not engage in activities for one's own sake. So, all these qualities are talked about by Bhagavan for showing how a person who has transcended the gunas will live in this life.
And how to attain? Yeah.
How does one, gain this? Bhagavan says in this chapter, Bhakti Yogena. Through Bhakti Yoga, one can become a Gunatita. One can will or transcend the gunas. What is Bhakti Yoga? You have to go to the previous chapter.
Yes.
Previous 12th chapter we talked about. Bhakti Yoga does not mean crying in front of Bhagavan or singing or worshipping. Bhakti Yoga means here Ananya Bhakti. The one who gains the knowledge of being not separate from Bhagavan gains this status of being free from the gunas. So one has to understand who is Bhagavan. So we have seen also 4 types of bhaktas.
Yes.
The one who is seeking Bhagavan when in distress. The one seeking Bhagavan as a means to gain something. The third category of bhakta is the one who wants to know Bhagavan. So that is being talked about. So one starts as the one who wants to have the knowledge of Bhagavan, and then finally one gains that knowledge that all that is here is Bhagavan in the form of Prakriti and Purusha. And I am that Purusha who is unaffected by the Prakriti. So through this, one can transcend the gunas and gain moksha.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arati. This is very revealing in terms of how to understand a chapter. It'll help us to get deeper into it. But we would request you to summarize as usual. So everything that you've said is consolidated, and then we can wrap up.
So this chapter begins with Bhagavan glorifying this knowledge by saying the person who gains this knowledge, there is nothing more to be done. This is the absolute knowledge that one has to gain. And gaining this knowledge, one gains moksha. And he talks about how moksha means there is no more janma, there is no birth for the person. Even after pralaya, the dissolution of the entire world, the person is not born because ignorance has been destroyed. Birth is because of the continuation of ignorance, and once ignorance has been destroyed, there is no more birth for this person. Then Bhagavan talks about how this entire world has come about because of this play of Purusha and Prakriti, and how he is the one who gives Prakriti, this Maya, the power to create, and everything else gets manifest because of these 3 gunas. Then he further talks about what these gunas are, how each guna binds a person, and what are the ways in which you know that one guna is playing out. So how does it manifest? Then he talks about what is the result of being dominated by a particular guna. Then he talks about at the time of death, if the person is dominant in one each guna, what happens? All these topics we have seen.
Why?
And finally, he talks about how one can get released from the gunas, where he says the one who knows that one is just a witness to all the gunas which are acting out in their various expressions, one can get released from these gunas. Then in the next section, Bhagavan talks about the Gunatita because Arjuna asks a question there. After Bhagavan says, one should aim at transcending the gunas to become a Gunatita. Then Arjuna asks, so please tell me, how does the Gunatita act? What are his various ways of interaction with the world? Then Bhagavan talks about how the person is equanimous with reference to all the opposites in the world. And finally, Bhagavan talks about how one should gain this Gunatitattva through Bhakti Yoga. Concluding this chapter.
So, thank you so much, Aarti. We'll meet you again for the next chapter. Namaste.